There it is. Welcome in. It's a Warrior Wednesday, and we have a Warrior with us, Jeff Kerr from CBS. Thrilled to have Jeff with me. Obviously, Jody McDonald has abandoned ship. Not forever, just a couple days. He's down in Key West, so he's living the life I want to lead, Jeff, at least for a couple days. I mean, anybody who's been to Key West, that's a fun place to be, and we hope Jody's having fun. Yeah, and it's Thursday. I screwed up. I don't even know what day it is. Once I travel. Um, so what does Nick Sirianni call Thursdays? It's Warrior Wednesday, it's Focus Friday, and it's Unfocused Thursday. So
Well,
we'll
he
go
don't
with
talk
that.
on Thursday, so I
Yeah,
guess we don't have a day for Thursday yet. Well,
that's
yesterday
true.
was definitely Warrior Wednesday in the NFL, John.
It's red zone and third down day. So how we'll say that. So the Eagles will be back on the practice field for the Los Angeles Chargers. Don't want to screw up two things. I could have said San Diego Chargers, Jeff. So at least I got the Los Angeles Chargers right. Justin Herbert, really a I don't know about you, but I love that kid as you know, if I were to pick one young quarterback that I wanted, and we have this definition, obviously Patrick Mahomes is still a young quarterback, but if you talk about the guys over, say, the past 2 years that have come in this league, I'd rather have him as a quarterback than anybody else. Your thoughts on that?
So when the 2020 draft happened, I thought all three quarterbacks are going to be good. I really like Joe Burrow. Obviously, he was going to go number one. Herbert was one of those guys. I really like. I'm like, okay, it all depends the situation he's in. I thought the Dolphins were actually going to get him, and Tua was going to fall to the Chargers, but it kind of flip flopped. And yeah, I thought Tua was in a good situation. Obviously, that's not panning out the way I initially thought. But Herbert, when he went to the Chargers, I'm like, oh man, he's going to put up some huge numbers there just with his frame and Mike Williams and Keenan Allen and all that talent around him, Austin Eckler. I really liked him from the get go. But if you asked me to rank the three, I said Herbert was going to be third. I still thought he'd be a Pro Bowl quarterback, but I'm really paying for that decision. I should have just went with my guts and said, you know what, Justin Herbert's better than Tua, and I didn't.
Yeah, you're not the only one. Obviously, I think the Miami Dolphins are sick about that. I think Cincinnati's fine. I'm a little concerned with Joe Burrow and the fact that he had that significant injury. I was more concerned coming into this season because we in Philadelphia know better than most people. He tore his ACL, but he also tore his LCL. And if that rings familiar, that's because that's what happened to Carson Wentz December of 2017 against the Los Angeles Rams. Tore his ACL and his LCL. Guy was never the same. I saw it up close. He's had some success over the years in 2018 here, 2019 before things came off the rails, and obviously he's having some. I don't know what do you want to call it in Indianapolis, Jeff? Success. He's okay. He's not been terrible like he was last year. There are moments when he's terrible, but that's a significant injury. And I remember we had Mike Tannenbaum on the show, and he mentioned he was concerned about Joe Burrow coming into the draft because he has a slight lower half of his body, very slight frame, and he was concerned about that. And ultimately, it ended up being that working out that way, and he was injured. Where you look at Justin Herbert, and I go back, that's the point. That guy is a big, strong pocket passer, and that's what the Eagles are dealing with. And that's where I guess we'll start first with this game on the horizon now is I think everybody was excited about how things unfolded in Detroit. And I think we get on this roller coaster. There's some kind of formula. They found the formula. I don't think you found the formula because if you do what you did against Detroit, well, it's not Jared Goff. It's not Amon-Ra St. Brown. It's not Khalif Raymond. It's Justin Herbert, it's Keenan Allen, it's Mike Williams, and everybody else they bring to the table.
Yeah, John. And one thing I like to point out with the Chargers offense right now, I think Baltimore might have I don't want to see they expose them, but I think there's got to be adjustments made to that offense. When I was at that game a couple weeks ago, what I liked what Baltimore did was they sent 5 guys and they said, "All right, we don't really care if you beat us up top. If you beat us up top, great. We have the personnel to do that." But what I liked is they knew the Chargers couldn't run the ball effectively. I think Justin Herbert was the leading rusher in that game, and he had 12 yards on 2 carries. It wasn't much. So they kind of took away the run. Then they sent an extra attacker and said, all right, let's see what you can do here. And, Jared Cook did not have a good day. He was not running accurate routes. And, Herbert kind of has that Mahomes part in him where he is looking for the big play and, instead of taking the 5 to 7 yard, easy shots. And I think it burned him because, he was off the entire afternoon. I remember in the first quarter, Mike Williams was open against Marlon Humphrey, and Williams was obviously bothered by the knee injury, but Herbert just flat out missed him. It would have been 7-0. It was an extra. I'm just thinking to myself, okay, something's up with Justin Herbert today, and I just chalked it up as a bad game. So I'm watching the Patriots game this week because they were coming off a bye, and it was kind of the same thing. I think the Williams knee injury plays a big role in that. So where I'm getting this is I think the Eagles should continue that Jonathan Gannon game plan a little bit of just blitzing the quarterback more. If he beat you over the top, he beat you over the top.
Well, that's interesting because if you think about, and this was not very popular, Jeff, the way that Jonathan Gannon played defense early in the season, especially against the better quarterbacks the Eagles face, and there were a lot of them in that first portion of the schedule. His goal was to play a lot of cover 2. His goal was to force them to go the length of the field, 13, 14 play drives, 75, 80 yards. And the assumption from NFL defensive coaches is something's going to happen. There's going to be a false start. There's going to be a holding penalty. There's going to be something that sets a team behind the sticks. Then you get off the field. That's the philosophy. Now, you go up against a Tom Brady. He's smart enough, and he's just going to pick that apart. He's going to say, oh, you're going to give me 7, 8 yards. I'll take 7, 8 yards a chunk and go methodically down the field. With a younger quarterback, that might be a good plan. If he's trying to force the football into cover 2 into that kind of shell, then you have a chance for some turnovers. But the Philadelphia fans want to hear that. They want to go get the quarterback, go get the quarterback, go get the quarterback. Madden, blitz, 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 blitz. Is that the prudent thing to do this week?
I think you should blitz a bit. Like, I think you should challenge Herbert and kind of get him off his spot. But I do agree with you. Like, if this is why I think Gannon's going to go back to the Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes thing. Like you said, Brady is cerebral enough where he can just be like, okay, the 7, 8 yard dink and dunk, that's fine. Mahomes was doing that during the Chiefs game, but then he got a little bit testy, and that's where Eric Wilson had the interception off him. And I think maybe Gannon's thinking, okay, Herbert's not as accurate toward an Austin Eckler when he's in the slot. Because in my opinion, Eckler he's being used right by the scheme, but Herbert's not getting the ball to him as well as he was last year. And same with Jared Cook. He's looking for the big plays to Keenan Allen, to Mike Williams. Now, this week I got to give him credit. He did find Keenan Allen on the short stuff, but I think it's good to kind of play 2 safeties high, and then you send that extra attacker just kind of get Herbert on the roll. Here's what I'm scared with Justin Herbert is. He's a pretty mobile quarterback, John.
Yeah. I don't think people realize that, you have the mentality. Jalen Hurts, obviously, on the Eagles side. Well, I mean, that's a big part of his game. That's arguably the biggest part of his game. And as an opposing defensive coordinator against the Eagles, you got to find a way to force Jalen Hurts to stay in the pocket. We often talk about, you just mentioned, getting quarterbacks off their spots. Generally, that's what you want to do with high-level throwers, make them uncomfortable. In the case of Jalen Hurts, you want them in the pocket. You don't want them scrambling out and killing you that way. So with Justin Herbert, I think, you have to approach it, and that's what makes it so difficult. You have to approach it as you want to make him uncomfortable. You want to get him off his spots, but you can't worry as much about that running portion of the game, and that's when guys can hurt you. That's what Aaron Rodgers has done for years. Nobody really goes into a game and says, we're going to stop Aaron Rodgers from running the football. But you see 2 or 3 big first downs almost weekly where he just takes it and takes that hidden yardage, as the Eagles like to call it. And Nick Sirianni likes to call it, because you can't. You need a 12th defender to handle both things. And look, I don't want to say Justin Herbert's at that level right now, but he's the kind of guy who was sneaky athletic, and he can pull the football down and run it and hurt you in that way as well.
Yeah. In that Ravens Chargers game, Herbert ran for a first down, and it was the only time Chargers could run the ball all day. And Calais Campbell, you saw him get up, and he's like, wait, he got a first down off that? Like, because he was getting pressured and went to his left, and all of a sudden, he's running for a first down. I thought he was sacked. I forget who was near him, but then he just takes off, and then, I'm looking at Campbell because he's down on the ground, and he looked up, he's like, wait, it was third and 9. And, he is sneaky athletic, John. And I'll tell you what, just from seeing him up close, and I'm not a tall guy. I'm 5'6". He's tall. He is ridiculous.
Oh, yeah.
Tall.
He is the old school. That's what the Eagles want at quarterback, if you're being honest. He is, the big pocket passer who can make every throw. And you hope he develops, the other stuff as you go on. But that's still the easiest way to win in this league. It really is. I mean, if you can throw the football, especially in the modern NFL, look, everything is slanted towards you. Everything is skewed towards the offense. The vast majority of rule changes over the years, we know. You saw it last week, Jeff, whether it was Mike White with the Jets throwing he was over 400, wasn't he?
Yeah, 400.
Cooper Rush on Sunday Night Football, throwing for over 300 against a good defense. I put that in quotation. It's easier to throw the ball than ever in the NFL, and I think that's why fans get frustrated when you can't throw the football. And we're going to get to that when it comes to the Eagles, and we break down what's going on with them offensively. I do want to stay in the league perspective, and we mentioned Aaron Rodgers. I want to bring up him real quick before we get to the first break. Are you immunized, Jeff? Are you?
I'm vaccinated. So, I mean, we found out that doesn't mean the same thing, apparently, over the last 24 hours. I remember when he said that. I think it was like in late August. It was like the only time he spoke to the media. I'm like, what is he talking about? It kind of swept under the rug a little bit. I think Rob, I can never say his last name, the ESPN Packers reporter, I remember he wrote something about it. He wrote a column like, is Aaron Rodgers vaccinated or not? And, he said his quotes, and people just slammed him for it. And I'm like, turned out he was right. I'd be patting myself on the back right now, retweeting that tweet. And I was like, we kind of skipped through it at CBS because we were tired of, the Carson Wentz stuff and Kirk Cousins and all these guys. Are like, all right, this is getting old quick. If you are, you are. If you aren't, you aren't. It's their choice. They're going to have to pay for it in the regular season.
Yeah, that's what happens when you have a union fighting for you. You and I have to get vaccinated to cover games, so it's not an option. But it is. I do want to mention this, Rob Demovsky. So he was the one from ESPN. I wanted to give him credit for that. But the thought process to me isn't, as you mentioned, Carson Wentz isn't vaccinated. Kirk Cousins isn't vaccinated. Lamar Jackson isn't vaccinated. For whatever reason, there's been a lot of high-profile quarterbacks who have chosen not to get vaccinated, which I think it's legitimate. It's a legitimate criticism to say, you're a leader of this football team. In theory, maybe you should start thinking about some other things than what you're focused on. But that's a different conversation. The conversation I want to get in with you is, look, everybody kind of assumed that Rodgers was vaccinated. So there looks like there's a lot of broken protocols, at least from the outside. I'm not in Green Bay. I can't say that for certain. But I do know the NFL has um, mandated, there's cameras all over the place at the NovaCare complex, at all these practice facilities around the country. And you saw what happened in Denver last year when their entire quarterback room was wiped out for a game. That's because they were on film, not following the protocols. It certainly looks like the NFL has two sets of rules. Oh, Aaron's a superstar. We're not going to worry about Aaron Rodgers. Whereas if you're a nothing quarterback in Denver, a backup quarterback, we're going to shut you down. This is just another bad look for the league, isn't it?
Yeah, I would think so. And, it's funny because we talked about Lamar Jackson in there, and everybody on the Ravens wears a mask, whether they're vaccinated or not. And when I asked the Ravens PR after the game, I said, "Hey, is there a reason?" They just they decided to do that team policy, and I'm like, "Okay, you know what? That's pretty smart. It kind of disguises who is and who isn't." And they all wore their masks in press conferences. They all spoke up well, and it's you could tell like this was week 6, I think it was week 6 at the time, and you could tell that they were all prepared for this, like John Harbaugh, Lamar Jackson, Devonta Freeman, Jason Owe, all those guys. And I'm like, okay, I figured many teams did this. And then, you see this Aaron Rodgers thing. But you're right, John. It is a bad look for the league, especially after what happened last year with Denver. And that was one of the games I had to do for CBS. I'm like, this is going to be interesting. Who's going to be the quarterback? I remember going into that game. It was like an hour for the game, and people were asking me on the block, who's the quarterback? I'm like, hey, I guess it's Kendall Hinton. They're like, who's Kendall Hinton? Well, everybody knows who he is now. He actually caught a touchdown pass this year. So,
yeah,
it's really interesting how when you look at the league and how they treat certain players. And again, it's almost like the NFL is getting like the NBA now. Superstar league, and we care more about the Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes of the world. When they get hit late, it's definitely a flag. But when a Jalen Hurts gets hit because he's not a superstar, maybe not, and they'll say, "Well, he's taken off," and it's kind of feeling that way with the vaccination process right now.
Yeah, Cam Newton talked about that a lot over the years. I do think mobile quarterbacks are at a bit of a disadvantage when it comes to those types of fouls. If you're a pocket quarterback, if you're Tom Brady, and you're never leaving the pocket, you're just kind of moving around, and he's phenomenal, by the way, with understanding where he should be in the pocket, climbing in the pocket, sliding in the pocket. Yeah, you're going to get protected a little bit more. Whereas if you're Cam Newton, you're this big 6'5", 260-pound guy. They're like, Ben Roethlisberger's has been in that same category. Just can, get rushers off them almost at will when they were in their prime. They give them a little bit. I've never had a problem with that as much as, but yeah, I mean, you're right about the NBA, and everybody talks about the Jordan rules, so to speak, and the quick whistles. And if you're a superstar, you're going to get some deference. There's no question that superstars get some deference. I even see it on the offensive line. If you're, I go way back. Obviously, everybody can see from the beard and stuff. There was a right tackle named Tim Irwin. I always, Tim became an agent, so a lot of people still know him, but he was a good player. He wasn't a great player, and we're going to get to a break quick, but I want to finish this. He was a good player. He gave Reggie White, maybe the greatest defensive player of all time, the biggest headaches of anybody, maybe besides Eric Williams in Dallas. And the reason why is because at the time he was late in his career. It's like he played for 17 years. He was sort of like Andrew Whitworth before Andrew Whitworth, to give people the best example, played forever. And by the time he got to that 15th, 16th year, they were like, oh, Tim Irwin's out there. He just held and grabbed and did everything, and he was allowed to. And they gave him sort of deference. And young guys who had this phenomenal talent, and Corey Stringer, people remember him for horrible reasons, and died of heat exhaustion. in training camp one year. He was a first round pick with this unbelievable talent, and he replaced him, or and Reggie White would beat him like a drum because he couldn't get away with holding, and he was a young player. So that gives you an example of veteran players and the deference. But it's Birds 365, Jeff Kerr. So we got to get back to the Eagles after the break. And after the break, I want to get your thoughts. You got to get ready for this. So I'm giving you a couple minutes. Your greatest moments of the Eric Wilson era in Philadelphia. I want to hear about it. Greatest moments in the Eric Wilson era. We're moving on from Eric Wilson, and we're moving on here on Birds 365 right after the break.
At Stateside Vodka, every new customer gets the world's best rocks glass, free.
What's that?
A rocks glass?
You're telling me that bottle is cut in half?
You could say that. Holy shit.
And you're telling me I can get one of these glasses for free?
That's right. One free rocks glass per customer with each first-time purchase of Stateside Vodka. So good, it just disappears.
When it comes to the fight against insurance companies, large corporations, and the healthcare industry, injured victims are always the underdog. But that doesn't worry us. At Messa & Associates, we're an injury law firm from Philadelphia, and we come to fight. Our clients know that they've got representation with a chip on its shoulder, and it's the same chip that makes Philly the toughest city in the country. Call 215-568-3500 or visit us online at messalaw.com. Messa & Associates, the toughest injury firm in Philadelphia.
In Philadelphia, we celebrated the miracle with pride only 5 years ago. And then the following morning, IBEW Local 98 members went back to work, building this city, rescuing our communities from decay, and inspiring the young men and women of the region to take pride in who we are. Like the Cats, Local 98 members believe in hope. John Doherty, business manager of Local 98, says it this way: the best way not to forget where you come from is to never leave.
Go for the midnight dares. Go for the game. Go for the hits. Go for the fans. Go for the win. Go to Ocean Casino Resort. Book your trip at theoceanac.com.
At Stateside Vodka, every new customer gets the world's best rocks glass, free.
You're telling me that bottle is cut in half?
You could say that.
Birds 365 on a Thursday, Jeff Kersey. That's what you do. Nick Sirianni, get 1% better. Now, Nick Sirianni says get 1% better every day. You could get 1% better every hour of every day. Why not? Why can't you get 2% better? Have we ever asked that question? I don't think we have.
Well, I bowl Wednesday and Thursday nights, John, and let me tell you something. I definitely need to get 2% better after last night. So 1% is not going to cut it.
1%, 2%, 10%, 15%. A guy who wasn't getting 1% better each and every day was Eric Wilson. Just the latest in a long line of, I don't even know if I want to call them terrible linebacking decisions, but you know the names over the years. The Eagles seem to do this every year. They bring in a linebacker on the cheap and they say, well, this he's better than what we had. And in the case of Eric Wilson, he wasn't better than what the Eagles had. Healthy scratch in Detroit. They officially move on from him yesterday. hits the waiver wire because we're post-trade deadline. I don't think anybody's going to pick up Eric Wilson, although you never know. He had some success as a backup player in Minnesota, but he was always a bad run support player. I warned people about that. That was his issue, really undersized, small, athletic guy. And that's what the Eagles want. And that's where the Eagles think the NFL is headed when it comes to defense. We talked about the passing game in the first segment. So they're probably right. But man, I've been talking about this all week, Jeff. There's got to be a happy medium here. There's got to be an organizational decision to say, all right, we don't value this position as much as other positions, and we shouldn't when you think about the obvious ones: quarterback, edge rusher, cornerback, offensive line, defensive line. But you gotta have something. We saw Micah Parsons on Sunday night. He looks pretty good.
Yeah, and he was one of – I know that's been the radio chatter this week. If you had to redo it, would you take Micah Parsons?
I know the Eagles wouldn't.
No, I know the Eagles.
That's all that matters.
That's what I said. Yeah, they just don't value linebackers. And, there were two guys I beat the drum for when they had 12, and I'm like, if they could get there. And it was Micah Parsons and Devonta Smith. I like both of them. And, those are the two I thought would be the best again. I'm like, I don't even know why I'm getting upset over Micah Parsons, because they're not going to draft him. They just don't value that position. I mean, one time I thought they got it right, John, was when they brought in Zach Brown. And he was a disaster here. And he's out of the league now. It almost seems like they get these guys who are productive players, but they were productive players more of because of the system or the situation they were in or the bad defense they're in. Like kind of like Eric Wilson, him and Fred Warner were like the only two that have 110 tackles and 2 interceptions. And I'm like, well, here's the thing. Fred Warner is an all-pro, and I don't know what Eric Wilson actually is. So, yeah, they just don't value this position, and they don't evaluate this position well enough. I mean, we can go through the list of, Corey Nelson's one of those guys. I like 10-2 coming out. It's just I don't know. I mean, it's so bad Jatavius Brown took a look at the situation and decided to retire rather than be part of this.
Boy, I forgot Jatavius. Yeah, he wasn't here. I remember Paul Warlow. He was the guy. He got hurt on the first play off-season work. He tore his ACL. So that was some bad luck. I think the Eagles gave up on LJ Fort a little bit too quickly. Ultimately went down. Yeah, he went down to Baltimore, played okay, but he's not a star. Either way, I guess my biggest issue is, look, last year it happened with Alex Singleton. They didn't want to play Alex Singleton. It became injuries, ineffectiveness. Then Nate Gary, everybody's favorite in Philadelphia, is out, and he gets on the field and he plays better than everybody else, and you can't take him off the field. Now, it's a bad football team, but we've seen Alex get a little bit exposed this season. They're asking him to play a little bit differently. Now we have TJ Edwards, who's they didn't want to play TJ Edwards. They tried to trade TJ Edwards in August. And he gets on the field because of ineffectiveness from Eric Wilson, starts getting more reps, and he's their best linebacker all of a sudden. Certainly was in Detroit. But, man, Alex Singleton, was in New England, Seattle, Minnesota, the CFL before he came back. And TJ Edwards was undrafted out of Wisconsin. Davion Taylor's the only player on this team, and Jody and I talk about pedigree a lot. It shouldn't matter as much as it does once you get into the weeds. But it means something in that, okay, if you're a first-round pick in this league, like Micah Parsons, you're good from a physical standpoint, from a trait standpoint. When people miss on first-round picks, Jeff, they don't miss because that guy doesn't have the talent to play in the NFL. It's the other things. It's the intangible things that drive people crazy. What's the kid's work ethic? Does he have a high football IQ, to use a Nick Sirianniism? All that kind of stuff. But they have the base skill set to play in the NFL. When you're undrafted, we don't know that. We don't know that, and there's plenty of undrafted guys. I covered one of the best undrafted guys in the history of football in Canton, Ohio, and that's John Randall. And by the way, the draft was 12 rounds. 12 rounds.
Wasn't John Randall? Yeah, I was gonna say I actually once thought John Randall was like a 10th, 11th round pick. Then I found out I went undrafted a couple years ago. I'm like, whoa, wait a second, that changes everything with John Randall. And,
completely undrafted, but that doesn't happen a lot. It's much more likely that you become a star if you're a first round pick. Roundabout way of saying you got to put some kind of assets into the position. When are the Eagles going to learn that lesson? It's been 1979 since Jerry Robinson.
I'll say this, John. I've been waiting since they basically got rid of Jeremiah Trotter and Carlos Emmons to answer that question, and they haven't done it. I remember when they sent Trotter off they didn't send him off. They decided, you know what? You're not worth the franchise tag. Get out of here. And they bring in Barry. They decide, we wasted a second-round pick on Barry Gardner, who we knew wasn't good, but we got to play him because he's a second-round pick, and we'll bring in Levon Kirkland. Well, that didn't work. And then, let's bring in Mark Simoneau, their prototypical linebacker today. And he wasn't any good. And now let's sign Nate Wayne because he made a big play on Michael Vick in the playoffs. Well, he wasn't any good either. So let's bring back Trotter. And they just haven't. Their last time they've had good linebackers was when they won the Super Bowl, when they had Jordan Hicks and Michael Kendricks. And I'll say to this day it was a mistake letting Jordan Hicks walk in free agency. But
and that's the thing. I mean, Jordan was a 3rd round pick. Michael was a 2nd round pick. And it doesn't have to be a 1st round. Look, I get not wanting to take a linebacker in the 1st round. I kind of agree with that sentiment. Now, it's always about the player. I always bring up the Christian McCaffrey point because, look, everyone says the Eagles are never taking a running back in the 1st round. Never taking a running back in the 1st round. For the most part, they're right. But they were going to take Christian McCaffrey. And what year? 2017?
2017 was the year.
2017. They had 14 overall. They ended up taking Derek Barnes. They loved Christian McCaffrey. I mean, and he kept rising up the board. It became pretty clear late in the process he wasn't going to reach 14. But if by some strange stretch, everyone woke up that morning and said, man, we're not taking a running back, they were going to take that kid. And so it's always about the player. And certain players can change your mind. Devontae Smith did this year. The Eagles don't want to take a wide receiver at 10. They never want to take a wide receiver at 10. But they said Devontae Smith's a little bit different. Not to the same level wide receiver, devalued position as linebacker and running back. But look, if the Eagles are top 10, they want to take, for the most part, a quarterback, an offensive lineman, or a defensive lineman. And there just wasn't anybody of that ilk that they believe deserved to go at number 10. So they've proven they've been able to shift their thinking. But you bring up Hicks and Kendricks, and over the years they've taken linebackers in the 2nd round and 3rd round. Davion Taylor, which brings up as a 3rd round pick, but man, that is a raw 3rd round pick. So you sit at, I think he was very late 3rd round pick, 102 maybe overall. If you're Howie Roseman, how do you take a developmental guy in the 3rd round? They're premium picks, 1st, 2nd, 3rd round picks. If you talk to NFL people, those are the premium picks. Can you take developmental guys with premium picks? I'm not a fan of that.
Yeah, not only did you take a developmental pick, keep in mind your first round pick was Jalen Reagor. Okay, fine. Your second round pick was a quarterback, and you had a franchise quarterback, and you didn't have a pick until 102. Who do you take? A developmental player. That's what I didn't understand about the thing. And I remember when they drafted Davion Taylor, I'm thinking to myself, okay, from our draft guys at CBS, they had him as like a late third, fourth round grade. I'm like, okay, so maybe this is when you take him. But I felt they would go the more proven route there, like you said, John, and they just didn't do it. And you saw how the 2020 draft kind of, I don't want to say changed the fortune of the franchise, but none of these guys immediately contributed. I mean, Jalen Hurts was supposed to be backup quarterback to Carson Wentz. Davion Taylor was not supposed to play. Jalen Reagor was supposed to come in right away, but I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, this is the 1 year you actually have draft picks at your disposal and you're drafting developmental players after having just 10 picks the previous 2 years? Like, this is what we're going to do right now? And it was a head scratcher for sure. And I don't know what Davion Taylor is going to be. I'm like, but this is what we're doing right now. We're going to use a developmental linebacker on. I just didn't understand. There were so many needs on that team. And I still think they should have double dipped at wide receiver in 2020 because that's how bad the receiving situation was in 2019. I still think they needed a cornerback or a safety, and they really didn't address those needs. And you need to get younger on the offensive and defensive line. Now, they did take care of that later in the draft with Jack Driscoll and guys like that. But overall, it was a head scratcher picking him. And, whether he pans out or not is fine. But third round pick, you basically went nearly 100 picks without getting an immediate contributor for the 2020 Philadelphia Eagles. And when you think about it, John, if you are Carson Wentz, you're thinking, what are we doing here?
Yeah, well, I mean, they didn't think Jalen Reagor was a developmental pick, which is probably the issue. And there's been some, the old Spider-Man meme where he's pointing at each other. I mean, everybody wants to run away now from that Jalen Reagor pick, which is kind of sad. It's this early in, but, when they blew out Doug Peterson, obviously, it was like, well, we knew Jefferson was a better player, but the coaching staff wanted a different type of player, and they wanted Jalen Reagor. They wanted to sort of, and I've said this a lot. I have a tough time saying this with a straight face. They wanted a Tyreek Hill type who could stretch the field horizontally.
5 years ago, if they really wanted to, they drafted Wendell Smallwood.
Horizontally as well as vertically. Well, Tyreek, a lot of people passed on Tyreek for obvious reasons, but that's one of those things. I don't have a problem with that, but I do kind of chuckle like, okay, you thought this guy was going to be a Tyreek Hill type, and knowing how NFL teams are, that doesn't mean they're saying he's the same player. They just think he has some of the same traits. I'm still looking for him. I'm looking they don't look similar to me. Now the Eagles finally got Jalen going a little bit with some manufactured touches in Detroit, and all of a sudden he gets hurt, obviously, which is typical. But you bring up a good point. Then I always considered it at the time, and it's revisionist history now because he's playing. Jalen Hurts was an incredible luxury pick. That's like a team that's Kansas City. It's been to 2 Super Bowls, and we're going to be contenders again. We can afford to have this luxury pick. Now everything blew up, and Carson Wentz handled it horribly, and all of a sudden Jalen Hurts has to start for you. And at least some people have said, "Well, see how we knew it." No, it was a bad pick. It blew up the entire organization. Has nothing to do with Jalen Hurts. But remember what the Eagles' plan was, Jeff. The Eagles' plan was, we're going to have a cost-effective backup for 4 years, and then we could spin him off in that 4th year. Maybe plays well in preseason. Maybe we can convince some Yahoo to give us a first-round pick or a second-round pick, and then you keep rolling it over. The plan was never for Jalen Hurts to play. So, I mean, those people are crazy. And then Davion Taylor, as you mentioned, in the 3rd round, then you take a completely raw prospect who played, I think, 1 high school game, had to go to junior college because he's a Seventh-day Adventist, so it was against his religion to play under the Friday Night Lights. And so it's going to take him 2 years minimum to get out there. And you're seeing those startup costs now with Davion Taylor. But now I'm going to turn a little bit and give the Eagles some credit. He should be out there. Throw him in the deep end of the pool. If the kid can't play, the kid can't play. But you can't keep throwing out the Eric Wilsons of the world. So I do give the Eagles credit for saying, you know what? Thanks, Eric. Really nice guy, tremendous guy. But he's just not good enough. I agree with the Eagles' philosophy at linebacker here, Jonathan Gannon. Let's just get Davion on the field, and let's let him sink or swim.
I agree with that. And that's one thing I liked what Jonathan Gannon was doing over the last couple of weeks. And I know you took notice, John, the fewer snaps for the Eric Wilsons and the Alex Singletons of the world. And, as much as we could criticize Jonathan Gannon, I'm like, okay, he knows this isn't working at linebacker. His grand master plan is, well, you gotta have the personnel run the grand master plan, as basically Brandon Graham was saying. And I noticed a little bit more TJ Edwards in games. And Davion Taylor, I'm like, okay, well, maybe this is going to be the combination, or he was trying certain things out. Like Alex Singleton still sees the field, but not as much as he did in week 1, week 2. So I'm like, okay, they like Davion Taylor this offseason. If he doesn't injure his calf, he might have started the year for all we knew. But you're right. Yeah. I like how they threw him basically into the deep end of the pool and said, you know what? We got to find out what you got, because if it's not this year, it's never going to
be. To continue on this linebacker thought, and TJ Edwards, in the game he played against the Detroit Lions, pretty good. I mean, pretty active. He does have a high football IQ. He's a real linebacker. He's like linebacker size. We don't see that anymore. It's just sustainable, especially if you look at this week. We talked a little about Justin Herbert. You mentioned Austin Eckler, who I think is banged up, but we all know what he can do. Just looking at him, he has a bit of a hip injury, but he practiced fully on Wednesday. So obviously the plan is he'll be out there. He's one of the best pass catching backs and has been for a while. And the Chargers as a whole, I mean, you go back years, Darren Sproles and LaDainian Tomlinson. I mean, I don't think there's a better organization, maybe New England, obviously, but they're right there for getting the football to their backs in the passing game. So this is a big test for this new revamped Eagles linebacker core.
Yeah, it is. And, there probably is one person that's not with the Eagles that's probably patting himself on the back on TJ Edwards' success, and it's Jim Schwartz, because he was always a big fan of TJ Edwards. And I think if Jim Schwartz would watch Eagles-Lions game and see what TJ Edwards did, I don't think he'd be shocked, because I remember when he talked, I think it was TJ Edwards' rookie year. Was it 2020? I can't remember now. It's been a couple of years. But, Jim Schwartz was like, hey, look, we feel like we got a potentially starting caliber linebacker, and he was undrafted. And he always mentioned his film at Wisconsin and what they liked and what they didn't like. And they thought they got a real diamond in the rough here. And I liked TJ Edwards when he played there. I thought he was a really nice, solid player. Not sure how he is against the pass, but we'll figure it out this week, because, and again, this is where I go back to Herbert's struggles in the middle of the field. Now, does a lot of that have to do with his hand injury? Maybe, but he's had the hand injury all year, and he was able to find Austin Eckler or Jared Cook early in the season. Now, we'll find out this week if they try to dump it off and try to test TJ. I'll tell you one thing. I think TJ Edwards will make the tackle right away if they complete a pass down his way, but it's coverage situation. That's where I'm a little concerned. Maybe that's where you have a more athletic linebacker in there, but what do you got right now? You got TJ Edwards, you got Davion Taylor, a position we might have thought was, I don't want to say strong beginning of the year, but had some depth. You really don't have that anymore.
Well, you also have Alex Singleton, so it's
That's
interesting.
true.
He'll be in the mix in the nickel. But I think, it's such an interesting contrast, because if you look at Davion and you look at TJ, and they're the starting linebackers now. So that's who they start. Those are the guys on the field to start the game. And it has been that way for, I think, 3 games now. You got Davion, he's the 4-4 guy. He's what you're talking about. He's the athletic guy who, in theory, can run with anybody in pass coverage in the passing game. Doesn't matter who it is. I mean, if you can run a 4-4, you're going to be able to keep up with the best tight ends in this league, the best running backs in this league. And then you have TJ, who didn't get drafted, and he didn't get drafted because he was a really good player at Wisconsin. He didn't get drafted because he ran whatever it was, a 4.8, whatever. He just couldn't run, right? And the NFL's obsessed with athleticism. So, what's better? If you take a false step at linebacker, doesn't 4-4 turn into 4.8? Or if you take the right step and you have that high football IQ, you have those natural instincts, and you know where the play is going, bang. Doesn't that 4.8 turn into a 4.6? Why are NFL people so obsessed with this? Isn't a track meet. Why are they so obsessed with annoying? I don't want to say ignoring. I don't want to say ignoring football IQ, but I would say one of the best. I've told Jody this story. One of the best nickel linebackers I've ever seen. Now, Derek Brooks is the best. He's got both.
Oh,
He had great athleticism paired with great football instincts. That's always what you want. But one of the best nickel linebackers I ever saw is Jack Del Rio. Couldn't run a lick.
Pretty good back in the day.
Just smart, as knew where everything was going. Try to run a screen against that guy. Watch some old film of it, wasn't happening. Why the disconnect in the modern NFL, ignoring players like that?
That's what's frustrated me for about 25 years. Mostly for most of my football watching, I remember, way back in the day, and Barrett Brooks knows him pretty well, James Willis. And he was one of those guys where they'd say, oh, James Willis, he's not this, he's not that. I'm like, really? Because he's always around the football. Same with William Thomas. He was another one. Well, he's athletic, but, he's not fast enough, or he's not. Well, okay, 7 interceptions in the season, 2 return for touchdowns tells me otherwise. By the way, every time there's a running play, he seems to be there. I think sometimes scouts get away from football instincts, and they look at, like you said, the intangibles, the 4.4s, or the analytics of it, or, this guy can do this well, this guy can do that well. And I'm thinking to myself, how about getting guys that have a knack for finding the football? That's one thing I always like Jordan Hicks for. When the Cardinals were thinking about benching him for Zaven Collins, I love what Jordan Hicks said. Well, you're not going to find a better linebacker on this team than me. And, he's arrogant about it. And I'm like, look, this guy is making $9 million a year. He could just say, hey, you know what? I'm getting paid regardless. You do what you want. Nope. He stood up for himself, and he's a captain of the team now. He's one of the reasons why the Cardinals defense is one of the best in the NFL, because he's always around the football. And you got a guy like Isaiah Simmons, who it's taken them a while to develop. Personally, because I don't think they know where to put him. I think they finally found the spot for him at outside linebacker / pass rusher. But yeah, you're right, John. It's very frustrating, especially at that position, because you got a guy like TJ Edwards who doesn't get drafted, seems to have a knack for knowing where the football is, knowing where his spot is. But we'll take a shot on the 4.4 linebacker, as you said, played one high school football game. It doesn't make sense in theory, but this is what they all think. Yeah. This isn't just Howie.
Yeah. They are too caught up in the measurables at times. And certainly that was, it's interesting. If you go back to Joe Douglas, it was the opposite. They had that draft. I like to call it the Donnell Pumphrey draft, where they leaned on college production a lot, more than they probably should have. So it is a fine line, because, Donnell is a perfect example of guy. His production in college was outrageous, but obviously didn't have the skill set to play in the NFL. So it is a fine line, and that's what makes the draft difficult. What's also difficult, and we're going to get into this after the break, Jeff, is the trade deadline. I want to revisit that because the Eagles were listening to calls, man, on Fletcher Cox. They were willing to move him. Obviously, didn't nothing. And I think the Von Miller trade affected that because of just the haul Denver was able to get to Von Miller. That affected the Eagles. Expected maybe a little bit more than they could get. But now you got a guy who's not happy in general, which is why the reason you thought about trading him, knows you tried to trade him, and you're in that type of situation. The Eagles also make a small move, which we'll talk about, Kerry Vincent Jr. And how many cornerbacks do you need, Jeff?
Yeah,
Especially when
you need.
Especially when you don't play any of them. You're not a dime team right now. So we're going to talk about all of that. Trade deadline talk. After the break, more Birds 365. Jeff Kerr, Johnny Mac coming back.
At Stateside Vodka, every new customer gets the world's best rocks glass. Free.
What's that?
A rocks glass?
You're telling me that bottle is cut in half?
You could say that.
Holy shit.
And you're telling me I can get one of these glasses for free?
That's right. One free rocks glass per customer with each first-time purchase of Stateside Vodka. So good, it just disappears.
When it comes to the fight against insurance companies, large corporations, and the healthcare industry, injured victims are always the underdog. But that doesn't worry us. At Messon Associates, we're an injury law firm from Philadelphia, and we come to fight. Our clients know that they've got representation with a chip on its shoulder, and it's the same chip that makes Philly the toughest city in the country. Call 215-568-3500 or visit us online at messalaw.com. Messon Associates, the toughest injury firm in Philadelphia.
In Philadelphia, we celebrated the miracle with pride only 5 years ago. And then the following morning, IBEW Local 98 members went back to work, building this city, rescuing our communities from decay, and inspiring the young men and women of the region to take pride in who we are. Like the Cats, Local 98 members believe in hope. John Doherty, business manager of Local 98, says it this way: the best way not to forget where you come from is to never leave.
Go for the midnight dares. Go for the game. Go for the hits. Go for the fans. Go for the win. Go to Ocean Casino Resort. Book your trip at theoceanac.com.
At Stateside Vodka, every new customer gets the world's best rocks glass. Free.
You're telling me that bottle is cut in half?
You could say that.
Jody Mackless edition of Birds 365 rolls on. I'm John McMullen. Jeff Kerr from CBS Sports, nice enough to hop into the co-hosting seat with me. I appreciate that, Jeff. Jody, living the life we all want to lead in Key West, Florida. You ever been to Key West, Jeff?
No, I've never been that far south. Far south I've been is Fort Lauderdale. I'm jealous of Rob Body. He's down in Tampa now. He gets to cover the puck.
Yeah.
You know, I say him all the time, why don't you come back up here for it? I wouldn't even waste my time. I'd stay down there and live the life Tom Brady wants to live.
Yeah, I'm with you. I when Rob moved down there, I said the same thing. I said, you beat me down there, Rob. And Rob keeps coming back. I asked him, he was on earlier this week. I forget if he said he's coming. He comes back for a lot of the games, a lot of the Eagles games, and he still hops on the Zoom calls when we have Zoom. The Monday pressers are still on Zoom. Rob always hops on. So he's still involved with Philly sports. He did it for so long. I don't think he can quit it. That's the thing with Rob. He just can't quit it.
I don't blame him. You know, I gotta ask him. I gotta know his secret here with the Eagles. You know how he gets all the years. I know he's been doing it for so long, but I'm like, Rob Maaddi is everywhere. You know,
Associated Press, man.
Yeah,
you got that. You got that behind you. You get a lot of weight.
That is true. It's funny too when I'm on like a Tampa Zoom call. I'm not used to him being in there, and man, Bruce Arians loves the questions he asks. So I'll tell you that.
Well, I love Bruce Arians, so I mean, and by the way, I want to rip Brandon Staley.
Oh, here we go.
The second coach of the year. So where are we? 3 and 5 with the Eagles. So 9th game, 9 head coaches. We haven't had any doubled up yet. So only the second head coach who wouldn't do his media availability with the local Philadelphia media. So this year there's been a change this year. It used to be mandatory. The NFL made it mandatory that the opposing coach would have to talk to the other city's media on that particular week. This is the first year where it's voluntary. And most guys have been very gracious and offered up. You know, we're only talking 10 minutes on a conference call. Arthur Smith, week 1, rookie head coach. Brandon Staley, week 9. And, you know, Brandon's been raved about.
He's vocal, too, when he talks.
And everybody puts his clips on Twitter. And, yeah, a little disappointed that he wouldn't put himself through the ringer, which is hardly a ringer. But I've been asking some guys, because I don't know it from Nick Sirianni's standpoint, if he's talking to the opposition media. So I've been asking a couple guys, and he has been. He talked to the Detroit people, so I give Nick Sirianni credit for that as well. Yeah, I'm down on that. I'm down on coaches. If you don't have the you know what to talk to the opposition media, I'm not a fan. Am I wrong, Jeff Kerr?
Well, this is what's crazy about Brandon Staley. After the Chargers game, he would have sat in that press conference for an hour.
Yeah.
He was so frustrated with that loss, and any question you asked him, he was very polite about it. He was just like, look, we got our butts beaten today, and here's why. And, he said, maybe we're not as good of a football team as we thought we were. And, he addressed the whole, he went for it on 4th and 3 at the 19-yard. He was excited to answer that question.
Maybe it is. Football coaches, they don't have time to do anything. I don't have time. I don't have time to do anything. I can't carve out 10 minutes of time. So maybe it's overblown a little bit. But I want to direct you to the trade deadline and the big, gigantic move the Eagles made every year. This is hilarious to me. Every year we get into this. Oh, so-and-so is going to move. So-and-so is going to move. And, there is more movement than ever before. But the NFL is never going to be Major League Baseball. It's never going to be the NBA, even the NHL for hockey fans. Ton of movement around their trade deadline. Guys are more willing to move. And a lot of stuff happens earlier. People forget the Eagles already moved Joe Flacco, Zach Ertz. They moved players just earlier. And then the deadline hits and everybody's excited and it just fizzles. And I saw, I'm not going to out anybody, but I saw, it was 4:00. Oh, the Eagles didn't do anything. And then 4:03 or whatever, it trickles in. Oh, they got Kerry Vincent Jr., who was a rookie seventh round pick of Denver, LSU kid, another corner, slot corner. And what? I got to pull it up, Jeff. How many corners we at now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 corners on the 53 yet. Craig James on the practice squad. That's 9 corners. And they only use 3 corners. They're
not a dime team right now. That's the yearbook for them.
And by the way, that's been probably the most impressive part of their team, besides, I would say, offensive line first, and then because of all the injuries and all the maneuverings and Lane Johnson's situation, I think the offensive line has done a wonderful job holding up. So I would say that first, and then second, I would say the corners. Darius Slay's been great. Steve Nelson has been solid as a so-called cornerback 2. And then Avonte Maddox is having a career year. Finally got to settle down in the slot, and he's playing really, really well. He's been one of the better slot corners in the NFL. And that's it. That's the only players they play. Now, last week was a little different because there was a blowout, so you got to see a little Josiah Scott and
Tay Gowan last week too.
Yeah, Tay Gowan was out there, but that was only because it was a blowout. Zach McPherson was hurt, but he had not been playing. He should be back this week. People forget Mac McCain is on this team. Who did I miss? That's everybody, right?
I'm pretty sure you mentioned everybody there.
So 8 guys on the 53-man roster. You had to cut Brett Toth, and I was a little I didn't think it was I didn't think it was a fait accompli by any stretch of the imagination, but I thought maybe he would get picked up on waivers because you and I have talked about this a lot. Jody won't listen to us. There's a lot of bad offensive lines in this league, and people look at what the Eagles are able to do. Look at last week. Jack Driscoll goes down. Five plays in. Nate Herbert's in there. They had what Lane Johnson called one of the best run blocking performances since he's been here, and he's been here for a long time now. And remember, Brandon Brooks isn't there. Isaac Seumalo's not there. Jordan Mailata's been injured, moving from right to left side.
Doesn't feel like they missed a beat, has it?
No, it's unbelievable. Jeff Stoutland is the best offensive line coach in this league. So I thought somebody would pick up Brett Toth because, he was with Stoutland. Let's see what he can do. Ultimately, he got through waivers. He'll probably be back on the practice squad, but we'll know that later today. We'll see. The bigger news, though, was Fletcher Cox, and the Eagles were listening. And the Eagles, and probably the biggest part of this story was that the Eagles, again, were willing to eat significant dead money to move on from Fletcher Cox, similar to what happened with Carson Wentz in the offseason. Now, we all know Fletcher's not happy. If you don't know Fletcher's not happy, you're not paying attention with this scheme. But now he's here. He's not going anywhere. Is that good or bad, Jeff Kerr?
Well, I mean, he's not happy, and yet I think the defensive coordinator listened to him. But if, my brain's telling me this is going to be the last 9 times we see Fletcher Cox in an Eagles uniform this season, because if you're trying to trade him at the deadline, why wouldn't you try to trade him in the offseason? And if you're willing to eat up a lot of his contract, which I was kind of shocked they wanted to do that because of how much dead cap would come. And keep in mind, you already got $33 million in dead cap from Carson Wentz. But I'm thinking to myself, okay, I heard Vegas, I guess, was the team that they were talking to about it. It was a couple teams, I guess, but I think Vegas was the main culprit there. But it looked like, at least in my opinion, I'm thinking to myself, I get he's not happy. I don't know if he would want out. The Instagram post to me, I didn't know what to make of it because he said forever Philly, and I'm like, well, that's so cryptic. Is he staying here? Is he leaving? Because Zach Ertz did a cryptic post, and I had to reach out to a couple people there. I said, hey, is he gone? Because everything kind of told me he was gone, and then he was gone. So I didn't know what to make of that. And, I get it. He's frustrated. I'm frustrated too. I'm frustrated they don't use him right, and he's right. He does get paid to sack the quarterback, even though he did get paid to tackle a screen last week. So we got to give him credit there, John.
By the way, that was overblown, Jeff. I mean, Fletcher Cox was always great at playing screens. His only point was, you don't pay me to play screens. He was always good at it. Always had what we talked about with the linebackers early in the show, great football instinct. So he would often, you'd see him how many times snip out screens and get that guy from behind. And, I get a kick out of how people what he was trying to say is he gets all that money to go get the quarterback, not play screens. And I thought people kind of took that in a weird direction, like he didn't want to play screens, but they've seen him play screens for 9 stinking years now. Did you miss all that? Or am I, but there's no doubt he does not like playing 5 technique. He does not like playing 4-eye technique. And, people go back to, when Chip Kelly was here, he played 5 technique. But he wasn't Fletcher Cox at that point.
He's a young player then. He did whatever you told him.
Yeah. Yeah. So here's how you have to look at it from Fletcher's perspective. All right. We look at the Doug Peterson, Jim Schwartz era. 5 years, right? He made 5 Pro Bowls. He made 3 postseason appearances.
Double-digit sacks.
Sacks. Was all pro, I think, at least second team twice. Obviously, they win the Super Bowl 52. It's a lot of success over a 5-year period. Now you have an entrenched player. So the veteran player is saying to himself, well, look at my resume. Look at what I did when you use me as a 3 technique and can just go wreak havoc versus, say, Milton Williams, who's a rookie and has a career game in Detroit and is Fletcher Cox under Chip Kelly. He's doing exactly what you tell him to do because he doesn't have a resume. He doesn't have something to point at and say, look, this is what I did when you play me like this. In some ways, is this just the natural evolution of what you have to do when you change coaching staffs? A lot of veteran guys are going to have to get blown out because they're not going to buy in.
It's happened forever. It's the dawn of time. I mean, look at Andy Reid when he came in there. You had stalwarts like William Thomas. I mentioned him earlier. He was a stud, and he barely plays under Jim Johnson. And I remember Jim Johnson when he came in. I was a football junkie at 11, but I'm like, okay, this guy's a veteran defensive coordinator. He's got a resume here. He's got a lot of guys he can work with. Brian Dawkins, Bob Taylor, Troy Vincent, William Thomas. William Thomas, he was kind of an afterthought, and he ended up having 3 more really good years with the Raiders. So I get where Fletcher Cox is coming from. It's frustrating, and you're entrenched in this contract, and what do you do? Because you agreed to restructure the deal to help Howie Roseman out, and this is how they repay you. They don't put you in the right situation. Now you're thinking, I may never get out of here. By the time I get out of here, I'm going to be 33, 34 years old, and no one's going to want me. I'm going to be the Alshon Jeffrey of the Philadelphia Eagles suit. And I don't blame him. I really don't. It's a frustrating situation for him. I think if the numbers were coming up, he'd be okay with that. But, you got talking heads like us. Why doesn't Fletcher Cox have a sack? Why isn't Fletcher Cox doing this? Why isn't he doing that? Well, I think it's the law of the land. New defensive coordinator, and guys are going to get phased out, and unfortunately, he might be one of them. And it's a shame because I thought he'd spend his entire career in Philadelphia and be a guy who ends up with 70, 80 sacks in his career. But looks like if he's going to go on that, I don't want to call it Hall of Fame pace, but one of the better defensive tackles of his era pace, he's going to have to do it somewhere else.
Yeah, and I think he is. I think you can make a strong argument that other than Aaron Donald, Fletcher Cox has been the best defensive tackle of his generation. So it is, and he's been the best, pure football player on this team for a really long time. But I'm with you. I think the Eagles showed their cards. If they're willing to say in early November, we're willing to eat this money to move on from Fletcher Cox if you give us a Von Miller sort of package in return, that's not going to change in the offseason, is it?
It should. In fact, the package might get higher because, again, Von Miller got traded for a second and a third at the deadline for Denver to take $9 million of his salary. I'm like, whoa, that's a lot of money for a guy who's been productive this year, but he's not Von Miller anymore. So I'm thinking, hey, Fletcher has a good finish to the year in this defense. I'm not saying the Eagles can get a first, but they can definitely get 2-day 2 picks for Fletcher Cox in, say, February if they're willing to move him. And by then you're actually going to have a plan because you'll know where to play a guy like Milton Williams more, or maybe you go after another defensive tackle in free agency with some cleared up and added cap space coming in from the league. So, or maybe you draft a premium pick with a defensive tackle, one of those first round picks you got. It's definitely going to be interesting to see what the compensation level is going to be for Fletcher Cox this offseason. By the way, John, I got to point this out. How funny was it Milton Williams got the game ball against Detroit?
Well, I thought it was interesting. I was thinking about that after, who said it? Was it Nick or JG? I get it, everything. I think it was Nick. After he said that, I started thinking, I'm like, he had a good game, Milton, but would I have given him the game ball? And I'm starting to think, I mean, I assume they gave out game balls to Avonte Maddox, probably Darius Slay as well, being the Detroit guy, so to speak. Darius isn't from Detroit, but we all know how much he likes that city. So I'm sure they gave out more than one, but I'm thinking, all right, they dominated so much. Who would I give the game ball to? Who would I give the game ball to? Then I start thinking, you know what? I would have probably given one to Herbie. I think he's unheralded. Boston Scott, Jordan Howard. I don't know. There were so many candidates, but you bring up Milton, and that's where I wanted to go with you. So we're on the same page. I think we're going to see the last 9 games. Is that where we are? Yeah.
Yeah.
9 games. 9 games of the Fletcher Cox era in Philadelphia. So what should be more important down the stretch of the season? Getting Fletcher Cox happy and stats, or getting Milton Williams up to speed? Could this, in other words, Jeff, I'm asking, could this get even more uglier from a standpoint of a guy not being happy?
It can, but there's one thing I love about the defensive line, especially in today's NFL. You can rotate guys and you won't even notice a thing. It's, Fletcher Cox can still play his 70% of the snaps, and you can find a way to get Milton Williams in at defensive end and defensive tackle, and you can find a way to develop a guy while keeping the other guy. I don't want to say you want to keep him happy, but if Fletcher Cox can go out there and get his numbers and help them win football games, which, by the way, Fletcher Cox still helps you win a football game. I think you got to do that, but I think Fletcher Cox definitely knows the writings on the wall with this franchise, and I don't know if he'll go to Zach Ertz levels in mid-January when the season ends, but I think he'll be, I think he'll be very appreciative of his time here, but I think he also knows, hey, you know what, the writings on the wall for me in this city, they're going to trade me. It's hopefully they let Fletcher Cox kind of, I don't want to say dictate where he wants to go, but have him find the right fit for him, because I think during the offseason, these players have more of a say in where they're going. Like if it was Vegas, I don't know if Fletcher Cox would have been crazy about going to Vegas, although him and the Gus Bradley defense would have been awesome. But maybe Fletch goes, you know what? I'm going to go there and Donald and the Rams, even though the Rams don't have anything to give them. But you never know. A team like Arizona, I know that was another team that they were talking down there. It's like, hey, maybe it's the Cardinals. Maybe he'll revisit that and join his buddies Zach Ertz and Jordan Hicks out there.
By the way, can I just say I love the Los Angeles Rams philosophy. Like they don't give two,
You can't screw it up.
What. Yeah. They don't give a you know what about draft picks. And I think draft picks are so overrated in this league when you compare them to proven players. Now, you got to be in the right position. You got to be honest. It's not for the Eagles. The Eagles are not, it was for the Eagles in 2018 and 2019, maybe. They probably held on a little bit too long to the thought that the championship window was open. And it's always a difficult decision. Probably the most difficult decision, Jeff, is to be honest with yourself and say, we're really a contender. We're not a contender, as Jeffrey Lurie did in the offseason with the transition year phrasing. Eagles aren't in that position. But when you are in that position, and the Rams most definitely are, give me Von Miller. I don't give two craps about a second round and a third round pick next year. Who knows where the Rams are going to be next year? You never know. Injuries in this league. They are a significant Super Bowl contender.
The Rams are a team to me. It's funny how their draft day, at least Sean McVay's is like poolside that's sponsored. I'm like, This is the greatest thing ever because they don't have to even make a pick till day 3. And everybody wants to see this blow up in their face because everybody values champions. Like, I'm all for it, baby. Just be the superstar. Let them be the Los Angeles Lakers of the NFL. They're a lot more likable because Von Miller's a likable guy and Aaron Donald's a likable guy. Jalen Ramsey, I don't know, but he's really good. So, but, I'm happy for what they do there. It's like, look, the last time the Rams made a first-round pick, he's not even there anymore. It's Jared Goff, and they were able to get a much better upgraded quarterback.
I mean, to me, it's just an overall philosophy of always thinking about the future. I don't know. I know where it started in Philadelphia. It started with the Sixers. Excuse me.
It is kind of working with the Sixers, though. Kind of. They haven't won that championship.
Well, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but I will say that, everybody values the future. At some point, you got to sit in the present and say, all right, I got to pick a player. I got to make a decision. I got to do this. And I say that because after the break, Jeff, we're going to talk about, it's Birds 365. We got to talk about the quarterback. And now you hear the whispers and Chris Mortensen. I love Chris. Just talking about Russell Wilson. The Eagles have wanted Russell Wilson since 2012.
They're still trying to get Russell Wilson.
Russell Wilson. Have the Eagles already made their decision on Jalen Hurts? Possibly they have. We're going to talk about that after the break. Like, subscribe, share. JAKIB Media YouTube channel, Birds 365. More Johnny Mack and Jeff Kerr after the break.
At Stateside Vodka, every new customer gets the world's best rocks glass, free.
What's that?
A rocks glass?
You're telling me that bottle is cut in half?
You could say that.
Holy shit.
And you're telling me I can get one of these glasses for free?
That's right. One free rocks glass per customer with each first-time purchase of Stateside Vodka. So good, it just disappears.
When it comes to the fight against insurance companies, large corporations, and the healthcare industry, injured victims are always the underdog. But that doesn't worry us. At Messon Associates, we're an injury law firm from Philadelphia, and we come to fight. Our clients know that they've got representation with a chip on its shoulder, and it's the same chip that makes Philly the toughest city in the country. Call 215-568-3500 or visit us online at messalaw.com. Messon Associates, the toughest injury firm in Philadelphia.
In Philadelphia, we celebrated the miracle with pride only 5 years ago. And then the following morning, IBEW Local 98 members went back to work, building this city, rescuing our communities from decay, and inspiring the young men and women of the region to take pride in who we are. Like the Cats, Local 98 members believe in hope. John Doherty, business manager of Local 98, says it this way: the best way not to forget where you come from is to never leave.
Go for the midnight dares. Go for the game. Go for the hits. Go for the fans. Go for the win. Go to Ocean Casino Resort. Book your trip at theoceanac.com.
At Stateside Vodka, every new customer gets the world's best rocks glass, free.
You're telling me that bottle is cut in half?
You could say that.
Thursday edition. Thursday. I got it right, Jeff Kerr. I got it right. It's always
1% better, John.
That's the biggest hurdle for me this time of year. I never know what day it is. I never know what day it is. Every day feels like the same. It's Groundhog Day. And that's what NFL coaches deal with and always talk about. And you're always worried about the next opponents, but here on Birds 365, we're worried about bigger issues, and the main event is always seemingly the quarterback in this town. And look, it just won't stop. And Chris Mortensen was probably the latest. And I forget where Chris said it. You might know, Jeff. I forget.
Podcast.
It was a podcast. Whose podcast was it?
Adam Schefter's.
Adam. I want to give him credit. And it was talking about the Eagles and moving forward at the quarterback position. Look, we've been talking about this forever. What were the Eagles going to do? Were they going to make a move for Deshaun Watson, which never materialized anywhere, and certainly wasn't going to materialize here because, number one, Deshaun Watson would not waive his no-trade clause to come here. And then you have all the legal entanglements on top of it. So that's on the back burner. We talked about Aaron Rodgers at the beginning of the show, and now the stuff that he's dealing with, and he's going to be out for 10 days minimum. Certainly going to miss at least one game, potentially 2 games, and we'll see how that goes from there. But as you know, the thought process is that this is Aaron's last year in Green Bay. So he's in the mix, but Aaron Rodgers is not going to come to the East Coast. He's just not. So that probably checks off Aaron Rodgers. Russell Wilson. You go all the way back to this offseason, and Russell said, maybe it's time for a new home. Maybe it's time for a change. And you remember his agent gave a list of potential destinations, which included, I believe, Chicago and New York, amongst a few others. I think Dallas was on there.
One of them. I think Denver was the other. If I'm not
Denver might have been the other. No Philadelphia, however, for whatever reason. Now, guys can change their mind if the Eagles start showing that they have more talent than maybe people thought. If people start to buy in on Nick Sirianni from a player perspective, maybe that people don't look at it and say you have an unproven head coach anymore. So all of this stuff is very fluid, as they say. But man, Jeff, I think it's pretty evident the Eagles understand. Maybe they don't know who it's going to be, but it's not going to be Jalen Hurts in 2022. Are you getting that feeling?
I'm getting the feeling. I don't like the feeling right now. I have a feeling you should make that decision after the year because I do think young quarterbacks get better in this league. Now, I'm not saying Jalen Hurts is going to morph into a top 10 quarterback over these last 9 games, but I feel like you got to try some stuff out with him. I know Nick Sirianni is trying to do whatever he can right now, and I don't believe them running the ball 46 times disguises Jalen Hurts' deficiencies as a quarterback. I actually think it kind of helps the kid out personally, but I look at it as, why don't we see if Jalen Hurts can throw the ball over the middle, can go to his left, can throw a deep ball a little bit more consistently, can do these things before we actually make the decision on this guy. But if I'm being honest with myself, they are looking at another quarterback for next year. And I don't know who that's going to be. And I said, look, I would love Russell Wilson as much as the next guy. There's two problems. I really don't want to trade what it's going to take to get Russell Wilson, even though they have the capital. And two, Russell Wilson has a no trade clause. What makes you think he actually wants to come here and join this environment right now? And that's where I kind of feel Jalen Hurts might be this quarterback for next year, even though they don't want him to be. But I want to see them develop this kid. I want to see what he has. I don't know if he's a franchise quarterback. I never went that route, but I feel Jalen Hurts can provide you with an extra dimension to this offense, and the Eagles haven't really tapped that yet.
All right. Well, I want to take you two different directions. So I'll start with this one first. As you mentioned, specifically Deshaun and Russell Wilson have no trade clauses. Aaron Rodgers has this weird deal worked out with Green Bay. He's going to be able to direct where he's going to want to go as well. So on the surface, it doesn't look like they can get any of those three players who are star quarterbacks. I think earlier this week, it was either with Jody or Joe Krause, I mentioned, if you put Aaron Rodgers on this team today, this Eagles team, they're a Super Bowl contender.
I would agree with that. I'll say this. Everybody thinks Dallas is that much better than them. But if the Eagles have Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, they're right in the mix. They are in that Elite Six in the NFC right now. They're definitely better than the Saints if they have him. And look,
so that brings me. I agree with you. So that brings me back to what we were talking about. The Rams. The Rams don't care. The Rams don't care about draft picks. Why does everybody care about draft picks? Why does everybody care about giving up draft picks for Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson? Who cares? You're not going to get a more impactful player with those draft picks. Odds are, if you're a betting
you're
man,
definitely not getting a quarterback this year. I think you're going to get impact players, but you're definitely not getting a quarterback this year.
So why is everyone so obsessed with that philosophy of, we have to keep this for the future, other than getting and Tom Brady has proven obviously he's an outlier, but Aaron himself has proven you can play at a high level in the modern NFL at quarterback till your late 30s minimum because of all the protections baked into the game now. So why does everyone care about draft picks over getting that type of quarterback? You say it's only going. First of all, here's what gets me going, Jeff. You say it's only 2 or 3 years. That's all you're worried about anyway in football. You don't know what's going to happen.
The Rams don't care what they're doing 5 years.
No.
They don't care what they're doing 2 years from now.
No.
They bottom out. They get that Vince Lombardi trophy. They could care less.
Well, let's look at remember in the offseason, everybody's talking about Carson Wentz's dead money and the Eagles' salary cap woes. You wake up today. What's today? November.
Yeah, salary cap woes. I wasn't aware because everything I look at says this would. If Howie Roseman would ever get fired, this would be the dream GM job, right?
Yeah, November 4th. I think Jacksonville has the most cap space in the NFL. The Eagles are second after the offseason. So that my point is, things change very quickly in the NFL. So don't worry about 5 years down the road. Worry about 2 years down the road, especially if you can get a superstar quarterback. Now, if you can't get one of those guys, then we go to the draft. The name I keep hearing, Jeff Kerr, is Kenny Pickett, Kenny Pickett. And I'm not disparaging any draft guy. I'm not talking about draft guys, Twitter guy. I'm talking about NFL people. And let's be honest, whether you agree with them or not, that's all that matters at the end of the day, because they're the guys making the decision. And they believe that Kenny Pickett is the guy rising up the board. Now, I don't know if he's going to be number 1 overall, but you know how this goes with
Kenny
quarterbacks.
Pickett's taken an interesting trajectory that a former University of Pittsburgh quarterback took once upon a time.
Yeah.
You know where I'm going with this here.
Yeah.
So,
And so the Eagles right now have 2 top 10 picks. I forget where the Indianapolis pick is. It's right on.
What is it? Is it 2, 9, and 10? Is that
Yeah,
it?
it could be. Yeah. 2. So you look at Tankathon. Yeah, I think you're right. It's 2, 9, and 10. They can do whatever they want to go get Kenny Pickett. Now that's a more difficult decision, because, man, you might have to go up from 2 to 1 depending on what happens. Probably not. It's going to be Jacksonville, and they're not.
Quarterback.
Or it's going to be Detroit, actually. So Detroit would be more likely. Houston would be in that conversation as well. They would be more likely to take a quarterback. So you might have to go up from 2 to 1, and you might have to give up 9 and 10 to get up to 1. How upset would that make Eagles fans?
It would be upsetting. I'll say this, though. You're at 2. If you're at 2, if you say Kenny Pickett gets drafted at 1, you're running that phone. You're drafting Kayvon Thibodeau. No ifs, ands, or buts. But it would hurt for them to give up all that draft capital to move up 1 spot. And you saw how much the Chicago Bears gave up to move up 1 spot for Mitch Trubisky, which, by the way, inadvertently led the 49ers to use all that future draft capital to get up and get Trey Lance. So there's going to be teams that, especially when they know Kenny Pickett is going to be the guy. And I've heard the same thing you have. Draft Twitter could say all they want about Matt Corral. They could say all they want about Carson Strong. Our streamers could tell me about Carson Strong till I'm blue in the face. Well, guess what? That's not the guy I'm hearing. Like, the Eagles can pick Matt Corral or Carson Strong at 9 or 10 if they choose to do that. But I am not wasting the number 2 overall pick on that. If you really believe Kenny Pickett's going to be the next quarterback for 15 years, I hate to do all that to move up a spot, but you might have to.
And it's always about the evaluation of a player, and that's my point. If you love a quarterback that much and you're convinced he's the guy, you got to go get him. You got to go get him. But in another way, Jeff, that's why I think it's so much easier to go get the proven guy. I mean, I don't know how other way to say this, but, and we'll put Deshaun Watson aside, because there are other issues you have to deal with as well, obvious ones that, you're going to take a significant public relations hit. You're going to have to convince the fan base that this isn't the worst human being in the world.
And you convince half your fan base essentially to go get the certain quarterback on the Texans I will not mention.
Yeah. So, there's complications with Deshaun Watson, not from from a pure football standpoint, it's a no-brainer. But again, it's not pure football. And we saw that in Las Vegas with the horrific incident that happened there. But
speaking of which, I got to go off topical. Did you see Kadarius Toney's tweet?
I did not.
Oh, when you get a chance, look at it. Boy, the Giants are in trouble. I'll just say that. I'm sure our streamers have seen it.
Well, now I have to look at it, but I'll try to do that in the break. But when it comes to Aaron Rodgers, and again, you're not going to be able to convince him to come here. I don't think you're going to be able to convince Russell Wilson to come here. So maybe it is, already done for you, and there's nothing you can do it. Very similar to Jeffrey Lurie gave Howie Roseman the green light to go get Deshaun Watson months ago, but he won't waive his no trade clause at this point. So that is a more difficult decision. To me, it's the easiest decision in the world. Tell me why I'm wrong, Jeff Kerr. If I can convince Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson to come here, it's the easiest decision in the world for me. And I'm giving up whatever I have to give up.
I'll tell you what, it's funny because I value the first round picks too, because I think there's a lot of holes that are needed on this roster. Unfortunately, one of them is probably quarterback. And I'm sorry, Russell Wilson, before he got hurt, was going to have the most touchdown passes through 10 seasons, beating Peyton Manning. It's actually kind of insane when you think about it. I don't care if it's a passing league or not now, that it's Russell Wilson. The guy has over 4,000 rushing yards in his career already. The guy is going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. He probably should have 2 Super Bowls. No, I'm sorry. I shouldn't say probably. He should have 2 Super Bowls. Pete Carroll's a moron. But this guy is a winner. He wins everywhere he goes. He's never had a losing season. It's clear, cut, and dry. I'm a big Russell Wilson fan. I would love to see him in Midnight Green next year. I'll tell you what, John. You say that Aaron Rodgers would make this team a Super Bowl contender. I think Dallas fans would be just absolutely peeing themselves if the Eagles got Russell Wilson. They can say whatever they want. They can say whatever they want about how they're better than the Eagles. The Eagles compete with them with Russell Wilson at quarterback.
All right, so that's what I want to ask you, Jeff. You agree with me that if Aaron Rodgers is here, the Eagles are right now, they're a Super Bowl contender. So you agree with me, and you're saying the same thing about Russell Wilson, and I agree with you. So why the hand wringing? Why the hand wringing about first round picks? I mean, yeah, I'd love to have everybody. I'd love to get, Russell Wilson for a 7th and a conditional 6th.
I like Kayvon Thibodeau too, so let's not get carried. I still love good defense. This labs we grow with Reggie White and William Fuller.
Yeah, but that's my point. I'd love to have him as well, but all right, if you're going to make me decide, I want the quarterback, and I want the quarterback that's going to make me a contender. Look at Myles Garrett. I mean, Myles Garrett is a phenomenal player. And you have to be phenomenal to be the number 1 overall pick in the modern NFL when you're not a quarterback. You're good. If you're that guy, you're tremendous. And Myles Garrett has turned out to be that type of player for the Cleveland Browns. Now, what does it do for you? It's great to have.
But doesn't Cleveland have an issue right now with a certain position that we're not sure about, even though they're really good?
Who was also a number 1 overall pick, yes, but that's my point. One can put you over the top and one can't. So to me, it's pretty easy. Remember, we're not talking about Kenny Pickett. I'm talking about the proven guys. We know Aaron Rodgers can play. We know he's going to Canton. We know he's one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. Same thing with Russell Wilson. What's to worry about other than things you can't control? And football coaches always say control what you can control. You can't legislate injuries. You can't say, oh, maybe it blows up in your face. But that's the NFL in general. You can't worry about that kind of stuff.
That's why I love the situation the Eagles are in right now, because they can pick if they want to get Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson, or they could pick if they want to draft a quarterback, or just say, you know what, we're just going to use our draft capital and we're going to draft 3 impact players at different positions. That's why it's the ability to pick and choose. You just got to choose the right decision here. But if I'm Howie Roseman, I'm going after Russell Wilson. And I love Jalen Hurts. I think Jalen Hurts has a lot of potential, but this is why I want them to develop Jalen Hurts, because in the offset, he might be half decent. You may be able to give him up and not give up one of those draft picks. You can have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah, I see. I don't understand. I don't understand, Jeff. I don't understand what you just said. I'm going to quote Jeff Kerr because I'm a reporter. Might be half decent. I don't want might be half decent.
Isn't that a terrible thing to say?
He might be half decent.
Yeah, you're going on a date. Yeah, he might be half decent.
Yeah. I don't want. I want Ciara. I want Ciara in Philadelphia. How can we convince Ciara to get Russell?
You got to get her that
Wilson?
1-2 step.
Yeah.
You know what? Maybe I got to get talking to Russ's PR people. Be like, I actually said something to DK Metcalf this year, and I asked him, if he wants to be in Seattle. He goes, he had to mention Russell Wilson. I'm like, oh man. So if Russ would go, who goes with him? Have your cake and eat it too, right?
Well, and then you start. We talk about, for years, the Eagles were a premium destination because of Andy Reid. In the success they had, and also, the Doug Peterson era, people wanted to come here coming off the Super Bowl. And now we're in a little bit of a different era where people don't want to come here. And they look at an unproven head coach and they look at the quarterback situation. One fell swoop with the veteran quarterback, and you're back into the situation you want to be into, where people will come here. You remember Alshon Jeffrey turned down multiple years and far more money to come to Philadelphia.
Now the Vikings have come to Philadelphia, if I'm not mistaken.
Because he thought, which is also ironic, he thought Carson Wentz was going to be a championship level quarterback. And he was right for a very short period of time, and everything went astray, and ironically, Alshon became disenfranchised with the quarterback that he came here for. So life is funny. It moves very, very quickly is what I'm trying to say. And that's why, especially in today's league, just go, Denver's going to get Aaron Rodgers. San Francisco is the dumbest organization in the history of sports.
Don't even get me started with how the 49ers blew this.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, they could have drafted the guy way back when. They made the wrong decision. Not that Alex Smith
paid for it.
Yeah. Alex Smith, he's from San Francisco. He's from the area. He wanted to play there. Loved the franchise, loved Joe Montana. Wanted to play there. They made the wrong decision way back when. And usually when you make the wrong decisions in life, you don't get a mulligan. Well, they got a mulligan. They knew that Aaron Rodgers wanted out of Green Bay, but they weren't patient enough to wait. And they used all that draft capital, as you mentioned, to get Trey Lance. And now they're stuck with Trey Lance. Now, maybe Trey Lance turns into a superstar. But again, they're in a position where I don't want the Eagles to be in, crossing their fingers and counting on developing a young, raw quarterback into a guy that you hope at the end of the day could maybe be 50% of the player you could have had.
That's what's crazy about it. I was trying to explain this yesterday with Jordan Love making this first start this week. Jordan Love is actually kind of like Aaron Rodgers in how Matt LaFleur is going to use it. That offense, that Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan, that tree, it's basically like you hit the three-pointer or you get the layup. And Jordan Love's going to have his layups on Sunday. Can he convert them? We're not sure, but they're going to go deep a couple times with Devonta Adams. Jordan Love's got the arm to do it. And that's why I don't think Green Bay is really threatened if they lose it. I mean, it's Aaron Rodgers. Don't get me wrong.
They're threatened.
But I think they kind of have a plan of what they're saying. I don't know what they're planning. Jimmy Garoppolo does not fit that system. Trey Lance is a better fit for that system because he can run and he can extend the play a bit. That's what they want. But
Kyle Shanahan, I'll tell you what, Kyle, by the way, is Kyle Shanahan the most overrated coach in the NFL?
Yes, it's the system. I think Kyle Shanahan's descendants are better than Kyle Shanahan, if that makes sense. Sean McVay, Matt LaFleur, guys like that. By the way, how does Washington not win anything with that coaching staff? It's insane. They had McVay. They had that.
Well, I don't know. I see. I'm not as big as on Matt LaFleur as you are. I mean, I think you and I could win. That's how much respect I have for Aaron Rodgers. I think you and I could win 13 games with that team.
No, I find a way to burn timeouts.
Well, yeah,
I would
I'm
probably
exaggerating. Probably not. You and I could win 10. All right. I'm going to give Nick Sirianni could win 13.
Now, John, do you know your headset turns off with 15 seconds left? That's all that matters.
Joe Judge could win 8. I'll take Joe Judge.
We're giving him too much credit here for being an NFL head coach.
No, but my larger point is on Matt LaFleur and Kyle Shanahan. It frustrates me. Like Kyle Shanahan wants Kirk. He still wants Kirk Cousins.
I don't get it. Why? Go coach the Vikings if you want Kirk Cousins.
Well, and he'd probably do a better job than, speaking of bad coaches, than their coach right now. It coaches every game like it's 1975.
And he's arrogant about it too.
Yeah, and there's a lot of bad coaches. There's a lot, and that's why I say the Green Bay fans are the most spoiled fans in the NFL because they've had Hall of Fame quarterback play uninterrupted for 30 years. Think about that.
It's beautiful. I remember when they were getting good again with Brett Favre, and I just remember people coming out of the woodwork there, all of a sudden Packers fans were like, where were you guys the last, in the 80s when they were god awful? And
yeah, and people forget, between Bart Starr and Brett Favre, it was bad. Don Mikowski's of the world, the Lynn Dickies of the world. But that's the point. When you get the quarterback, everything is masked. People say, well, Green Bay's so good. Green Bay's so good. Green Bay's so good. No, they're not so good. The quarterback's so good. And that's why I'm saying you change one piece of the puzzle and you trade Aaron Rodgers for Jalen Hurts, and the Eagles are the Packers, and the Packers are the Eagles.
By the way, you want a perfect example? The Denver Broncos. They were nothing before Peyton. Peyton signs there. All of a sudden, you get Brandon Stokely to come, Wes Welker to come, Demaryius Thomas comes in all pro. TJ Ward literally told me during the Super Bowl, I went to Denver because Peyton Manning was there. He don't even play on the same side of the ball as him.
Yeah.
And, Von Miller, he becomes a Hall of Famer because of all that. They win the Super Bowl because of their defense. Their defense is great. Their offense was great. And Denver loses Peyton Manning, and all of a sudden you get Trevor Siemian, Drew Lock, Brett Rippon, all those guys. They're still looking for a quarter. By the way, they're going to get Aaron Rodgers because they have so much draft capital now. It doesn't matter.
And I hesitate to go down this path because there aren't a lot of these guys. I think that's what people don't understand. So most of the league, you can win in other ways. Your just margin of error is much smaller. So in the Eagles' case, they have to hope. What was your quote, Jeff? They have to hope that maybe Jalen Hurts becomes
half decent. Might be half decent.
Might be half decent. Then they have to have a great defense. They have to have a great run again. They have to have everything perfect, working in lockstep, and maybe you can make a run on a particular season. Now, the consistency is not going to be there. You brought up Peyton Manning. The most impressive thing, who I think is the best regular season quarterback of all time, and Tom Moore, who is a lot of years, one of my favorite. I don't know if it's either my favorite or second favorite quote in NFL history is from Tom Moore, and somebody asked him. Didn't cover the Colts on a consistent basis. It was during the Super Bowl week, and somebody asked him, didn't know how NFL teams practice, and they said, why don't you give? I think Jim Sorgi was the backup at the time. Why don't you give the backup any reps in case? And Tom Moore, anybody who's ever met Tom, he just looked at him and said, "We can do this on YouTube, Jeff." He looked at him and said, if 18 gets hurt, we're fucked, and we don't practice fucked. which was to me, just phenomenal.
I do probably remember him saying, I remember when Jim Sorgi would come in, and I'm like, wait, the Colts are going to blow a perfect season because they want Jim Sorgi to play quarterback?
Yeah.
Or are they that worried about Peyton getting hurt? What a waste of time.
The whole point of that Colts during that era and then the Broncos, you would go into a season saying, okay, we're going to start with 10 wins. That's like the default setting, double digits. That's a bad year. A good year, you'd get to 13 or 14. And, that was your sliding scale. That's how consistent.
The Eagles were like that in the early 2000s. It was if they start 2-3 and the sky's falling. And I'm like, Andy Reid will fix this. He's got a franchise quarterback. He's got elite defense. Guys are going to get it. That's why I keep saying with Kansas City, I'm like, give me Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. I don't care if they're 4.
And that's where I'm trying to get to. And that's where I'm trying to get to, that consistency. You don't want to make the run. You can, and like I said, if everything's clicking on all cylinders, you got a good defense, a good running game, you got a quarterback who can maybe do some things, you can make a run on a particular year. What you want to be able to do is what Andy Reid created with all the NFC championship games. The more times you get there, the more chances the stars align and you get over the hump and you get one. Ultimately didn't happen until he got to Kansas City. So that, to me, is the ultimate goal of every NFL team. And if you can get the quarterback, you're a lot closer than if you don't have the quarterback.
Look at how much Dick Vermeil's career changed, and all those players changed with the Rams. Marshall Faulk, great player, probably would have been a Hall of Famer anyway. Lock with Kurt Warner. Isaac Bruce going to the Hall of Fame because of Kurt Warner, even though he was good before him. Torrey Holt will probably go to the Hall of Fame. Kurt Warner's going to, Dick Vermeil's going to go to the Hall of Fame. It all connects.
It does all connect, and what connects next, I'm going to steal from Jody McDonald, Jeff Kerr. It's time to put a bow on the show. Special Johnny Mac edition with Jeff Kerr, Birds 365. We'll wrap it up after the break.
At Stateside Vodka, every new customer gets the world's best rocks glass, free.
What's that?
A rocks glass?
You're telling me that bottle is cut in half?
You could say that.
Holy shit.
And you're telling me I can get one of these glasses for free?
That's right. One free rocks glass per customer with each first-time purchase of Stateside Vodka. So good, it just disappears.
When it comes to the fight against insurance companies, large corporations, and the healthcare industry, injured victims are always the underdog. But that doesn't worry us. At Messon Associates, we're an injury law firm from Philadelphia, and we come to fight. Our clients know that they've got representation with a chip on its shoulder, and it's the same chip that makes Philly the toughest city in the country. Call 215-568-3500 or visit us online at messalaw.com. Messon Associates, the toughest injury firm in Philadelphia.
In Philadelphia, we celebrated the miracle with pride only 5 years ago. And then the following morning, IBEW Local 98 members went back to work, building this city, rescuing our communities from decay, and inspiring the young men and women of the region to take pride in who we are. Like the Cats, Local 98 members believe in hope. John Doherty, business manager of Local 98, says it this way: the best way not to forget where you come from is to never leave.
Go for the midnight dares. Go for the game. Go for the hits. Go for the fans. Go for the win. Go to Ocean Casino Resort. Book your trip at theoceanac.com.
At Stateside Vodka, every new customer gets the world's best rocks glass, free.
You're telling me that bottle is cut in half?
You could say that.
Wrapping up a Thursday edition. I did get 1% better. I think I got Thursday correct 4 out of 5 times, Jeff. That's not
Carson
bad.
Wentz and Mike White play tonight, so it is Thursday.
Yeah, that's a good point. Carson Wentz versus Mike White. We were going to have Patrick Mahomes versus Aaron Rodgers this week. That has been taken away from us. OBJ, Odell Beckham, is excused from practice again. I put that. He's excused how long before he goes down the mental health route like Ben Simmons? Who knows? We'll stay tuned for that. And Eagles Chargers. We got to get back into that. You're going to be here tomorrow, right, Jeff Kerr?
I believe so. I didn't get the exact call yet, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to be here.
All right. So we'll dive deeper to the Eagles Chargers on tomorrow's program, which is, to me, it's an interesting matchup because Chargers, this is a winnable game for the Eagles. But I always say, winnable games are also losable games, by nature. In other words, they're a good team. They're not a great team. And the Eagles should have a chance to win this game. One of the issues, Jeff, we'll get into tomorrow as well, is this team is 3-5, all 3 wins on the road. They haven't been able to win at Lincoln Financial Field, and that used to be one of the best home field advantages in football. Now, part of it is the competition. You've had some pretty significant competition. Tampa Bay, the reigning Super Bowl champions, Kansas City, the reigning AFC champions, San Francisco. Everybody thought they were going to be a playoff team at the beginning of the season. Hasn't worked out, but still plenty of talent on that team. So it hasn't been easy, but man, you got to win one at home, don't you?
You would think, right? I picked the Lions last week because I thought karma was going to kind of catch up. Like, teams just don't lose 12 in a row, and they don't start 0-8, and Jared Goff is bound to win one without Sean McVay as his head coach, and yet it still happened. And, I'm thinking to myself, well, the Eagles are 0-7-1 against their last 8 AFC opponents. They have lost 4 at home. First time since 2012, 2013. You would be oppressed to think they're going to win one, right? I mean, the Chargers are a better football team than them, but you're right. Like, they're at home. They should be able to win one of these tough football games. I almost thought they were going to pull it off in Tampa Bay if they would have got a break here and there, but they got to win one at home at some point. Maybe the Giants will be that way. Did
you hear Jason Kelsey's comments yesterday, Jeff?
No, I didn't. I was too enthralled to Voda, Beckham, and Jordan Love stuff. What did he say yesterday?
Well, as you know, Jason is always great, always honest. The one that caught on is he talked about the only reason he still plays football is the cafeteria
comment.
The cafeteria comment and the locker room. But beyond that, deeper into the conversation, he got asked about why the Eagles haven't won at home, and all their wins have come on the road. And he kind of threw in there, and he wasn't being negative. He wasn't trying to be mean. He just said, I think that, and I'm paraphrasing, I think Jim Schwartz's defense was better equipped for home. In other words, going hard after the quarterback. There's so much noise. It's really difficult for the opposing team with the silent counts. He thought that type of defense gave them a far bigger edge at home. And I just thought it was, wow. I'm surprised more people didn't pick up on that because you know how Philadelphia are, and they'll think he's throwing Jonathan Gannon under the bus. He wasn't, but he brought up a good point. It's true. When you have teams that come after you at home and you're on the road and you got the silent count, it becomes really, really difficult to pass block.
That actually is funny because, in my opinion, I always thought the Eagles lost to him because they're too busy playing Party in the USA during commercials instead of actual football music. But I digress. but yeah, you're right. It just seems like, and maybe it's just how the fan base is used to things, blitzing at home and going, like you said, going after the quarterback and kind of putting that stamp on, like, this is our house. We're afraid of coming here. And you just don't see that with this football team, especially this defense. It's just dink and dunk our way into the end zone. And
dink and dunk. We'll get more into that tomorrow. We'll get our predictions on the game. We'll get on the record for that. Stay tuned.
I'm already on the record.
Yeah.
It's already in print, John.
All right. Foreshadowing. Jeff Kerr. Who'd you pick? Now, wait. Keep it till tomorrow. I don't want to know.
CBSSports.com. You can find out.
CBSSports.com for Jeff Kerr. Stick here on the JAKIB Media YouTube page. We got the middle with our friends Eitan Shander, Harry Mays, Barrett Brooks, then the National Football Show with Dan Cilio, Football 24/7 with myself, Burst 365 on demand at any time. Like, subscribe, share, and we'll see you in about 22 hours talking Eagles Chargers on a Football Friday.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and